So at this point, you may be wondering, why all this hype around all of these calculated column and measure formulas that we've been playing with so far, our basic date and time, the logicals, the text functions, they're all pretty intuitive and pretty straightforward. Now that we've covered all of those basics, some of those fundamentals, it's time to get started exploring some of the more interesting DAX functions. And we're going to talk about one called related. And in this context, I'm going to show you how to use related as a calculated column. And then later on in this section, we're actually going to revisit the related function by nesting it within a SumX measure, right? And SumX is an iterator. And what's really, really cool is these iterator functions in DAX allow you to do some really cool things. So that's where things are going to get a little bit more interesting and start to pick up a little bit more quickly. So the related function on its own is very simple. It just returns related values in each row of a table based on a relationship with the other table. And one thing to point out here is that related works on the one side of a one-to-many table relationship, right? So you need to be on the many side of the relationship, reaching over to the one side, right? So that's where these table relationships become very important. So syntax-wise, it's as simple as it gets. You literally just point related to a column in another table, right? And this is basically defining the values that you want to retrieve. So this could be something like a product name or retail price or a country column, whatever it might be, as long as that there's a valid relationship that exists between those two tables, right? A valid one-to-many relationship, you're good to go. So just a tip here. This works almost exactly like a VLOOKUP function does in Excel. It uses the relationship between the tables, which we're defining by our primary and foreign keys, to just reach into that table that's on the one side and grab the values it needs to pull them into a new column of another table that's on the many side. But the thing is it works like VLOOKUP, but it's even simpler than a VLOOKUP, because we don't need to define the lookup value or the match type or those other arguments that we'd need to include if we were writing this lookup in Excel. And the reason we don't have to define a lookup value explicitly is because Power BI already knows what your lookup value is because it understands the connection between your two tables. And that's why all you have to do for this function is input the column name. Whereas in Excel, you're essentially defining your primary key within that lookup function. So here with related, because we've done all of our data modeling already, that step isn't necessary. One other note about the related function is that it does require row context because it needs to pull the correct value from each row of the table. So you'll only see related being used as either a calculated column, which is what I'm going to show you in this demo, or as part of an iterator function that's designed to cycle through tables row by row by row. So functions like filter or SumX or MaxX, etc. Now, pro tip here, you may be thinking, all right, this concept makes sense, but isn't it kind of against the normalization standards where we said we don't want to create redundant data like this? And yes, you are correct. Related does technically create redundant data, so it's important not to go overboard with related. You don't want to use this function to, kind of hack your way through this huge merged table, but using it strategically to make certain fields more accessible can be a valid approach. That said, in many cases, you can actually replace the calculated column version of related by nesting it within an iterator function like filter or SumX. Right? So again, kind of as a best practice, instead of using related to create those extra columns, really try to use it with measures. And again, we're going to do a demo on that a little bit later with SumX. So with that, let's pop back into our AdventureWorks file, and we're going to try adding a new calculated column using the related function. So you may be thinking that, hey, so far we've been pretty limited as to the, numerical and quantitative values that we've been able to analyze here so far. So if I go over here into the product lookup, right, you see that we've got these other columns here, right? We've got this product cost, product price column, we created discount price, right? And what I'd like to be able to do is I want to be able to pull these columns into my sales table to then be able to do some calculations for things like, revenue. And if we jump back to our relationship view here, just as a refresher, right, we know that our sales table, we scroll down here, right? Our sales table has a valid relationship to all of our lookup tables, to calendar, to our customer table, our territory lookup, and then our product lookup as well. So what that means is that we can actually use related here, and that's going to allow us to access fields from any one of these lookup tables and then bring it in at the row level within our sales table. So that's what we're going to do here using retail price as an example. All right, so let's head back over to the data view and we'll click on our sales table. And what I want to do is add a new column. And we're going to call this column retail price. And what we're going to start typing here is related. It returns a related value from another table. Super simple, a single argument. It's just a column value. And again, if you start looking at the table options here, you can see we've got our customer lookup, our product category lookup, our product lookup, product subcategory lookup, territory lookup. It's all of those tables that are on the one side of the relationship, right? Those are all of the columns that we can access here. So we want to bring in is the product price from our product lookup table. And we'll close our parenthesis here, lock that in, right? And look at what we get, right? We've got this value here for every record of the table. And what I actually want to do is I am going to sort this by product key real quick. We'll sort ascending, right? And we can see here that product key 214, $34.99. We scroll down, 215, $33.64. Right? If we jump back over into our product lookup table and we do the same thing here, if we sort by our product keys, we can confirm that related is bringing over the proper price. Right? So we've got 214 and 215 right at the top here, $34.99 and $33.64. Right? So those values are the same. So related is bringing over these values. Everything looks appropriate. Right? So if we head back over to the sales data table here, where this becomes a little bit more powerful here is that we can actually do something like a revenue calculation. Right? So we could say, hey, I want to multiply the quantity that was ordered by the retail price, and that's going to tell me the revenue that we earned per product. All right, so again, same drill here. Let's add a brand new column in, and we're going to call this revenue. Right, and for this, basically what we want to say is that this is going to equal the retail price, right? And because again, these calculated columns have row context, it's saying, hey, you're starting to type in this column. We want to multiply our retail price times the order quantity, right, from the sales table. That's all we need to do. Basically say, hey, multiply the value in the retail price column by the order quantity. And again, you can see it looks like it's returning the proper value. You can actually sort this order quantity column descending. Here we've got a quantity of 3. The retail price is $21.98. You multiply that by 3. Again, we got $65.94. So everything looks pretty accurate. All right, so there you go. We've used the related function to basically reach into the product table, right? We've traversed that relationship to grab the retail price and pull it into our sales data table as a new column. And then once that column was in our sales table, we were able to multiply it by another column to create our revenue column. Hopefully this makes sense to you, the whole way that related works. And again, it can be a very useful and handy function when you do need to grab those related values from the one side of a relationship. All right, up next, we're going to dig into one of the most important functions in DAX called calculate.